Her engagement was cancelled, and she randomly married a poor man, unaware he was a mysterious millionaire. The grand ballroom of the Shilla Hotel in Seoul shimmered under the golden glow of chandeliers. The air was thick with the scent of roses, champagne, and the quiet murmur of high society chatter. Everything was perfect, exactly as Ji-eun had imagined her engagement party to be. She stood near the center of the room, her hands lightly clutching a glass of sparkling wine, her heart beating a little faster in excitement. Tonight, in front of everyone, she and Kang Min-ho would finally announce their engagement. Her fiancé was running late, but that wasn't unusual. Min-ho was a busy man, a rising star in the business world, ambitious and sharp. But he always showed up for her. Always. She adjusted the delicate lace on her pale blue dress, stealing a glance at her parents, who were engaged in polite conversation with a group of influential guests. They had pushed for this engagement, ensuring that Min-ho was the right match for their family's legacy. Ji-eun sighed, taking another sip of champagne. Where is he? Then the doors to the ballroom swung open. All eyes turned, and in walked Min-ho, not alone, but hand in hand with another woman. Ji-eun's heart stopped. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A waiter froze mid-pour, champagne spilling onto the tablecloth. Cameras from the invited press turned, capturing the scandal unfolding before them. Ji-eun couldn't move. Yunari, the daughter of one of Min-ho's most important business partners, stood beside him, stunning in a sleek red gown that clung to her like a second skin. Her lips curved into a smirk. And Min-ho? He looked completely unbothered, still holding Nari's hand. Ji-eun forced herself to speak, her voice a whisper barely audible over the tension filling the room. Min-ho? He stopped a few feet away from her, looked her dead in the eyes, and then, with chilling indifference, he spoke. Ji-eun, I can't marry you. The words hit her like a slap. The entire room fell silent. Ji-eun's breath hitched. What are you saying? Min-ho exhaled as if this was nothing more than a slight inconvenience. Let's be honest here, Ji-eun. You have nothing to offer me. Her stomach twisted. I don't understand. You proposed to me. Min-ho's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Did I? Or was it just a conversation our families arranged? Her vision blurred. I needed the leverage of your family's name, he continued, but now I have better options. Nari chuckled softly, squeezing Min-ho's arm. He means me. Ji-eun felt sick. This is a joke, right? She whispered, her voice breaking. Min-ho's eyes hardened. I never loved you, Ji-eun, he said, his voice sharp and cutting. You were just a stepping stone. And now I don't need you anymore. A sharp gasp broke through the room. Someone dropped a glass. Ji-eun's hands trembled as she stared at him, trying to find anything, any sign that this wasn't real, that this wasn't happening. But Min-ho just smirked. Nari tilted her head, faux sympathy dripping from her voice. You're a sweet girl, Ji-eun. But let's be real, you don't belong in Min-ho's world. You never did. Ji-eun's entire body went cold. 100 pairs of eyes were on her, watching, waiting to see how she would crumble. She could feel the whispers. Poor girl. So embarrassing. Did she really think he loved her? Her mother's voice cut through the suffocating silence. Ji-eun. Ji-eun turned slowly, hoping, just this once, that her mother would defend her. But the look on her mother's face wasn't one of concern. It was disgust. You have humiliated us, her mother said, her voice low and sharp as a blade. Ji-eun's mouth parted. I didn't. If you can't secure a husband with wealth and power, her mother continued coldly, then you are no longer a daughter of mine. The final blow. Ji-eun staggered back. Her mother turned away, leaving her alone in a room full of people. Her entire world had just shattered. The streets of Seoul were unforgiving at night, especially when you were walking alone in an evening gown that no longer felt like it belonged to you. Ji-eun's heels clicked against the pavement, the sound sharp, relentless, mocking. Her feet ached, the delicate shoes digging into her skin. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop, not when every time she closed her eyes, she could still hear Minho's voice. Cold. Final. I never loved you. Her mother's voice wasn't far behind, slicing through her already broken heart. You are no longer a daughter of mine. A shaky breath escaped her lips as she stumbled forward, the crisp night air burning her lungs. The diamond engagement ring that had once sat proudly on her finger was gone, left abandoned on the marble floor of the ballroom. She had nothing now. No fiancé. No family. No future. She didn't know how long she wandered, but eventually the warm glow of a small, dimly lit bar pulled her in. It wasn't the kind of place she normally would have set foot in, too old, too quiet, too unfamiliar. But right now, she didn't care. She just needed a drink. The bartender barely glanced at her as she slid onto the worn-out stool, her dress out of place against the peeling wood and flickering neon lights. Whiskey, she muttered. Neat. The bartender raised an eyebrow but said nothing, pouring her a glass before stepping away. Ji-eun downed the first sip, wincing as the burn seared down her throat. Good. She wanted it to hurt. You don't seem like the whiskey type, a voice said, smooth, deep, edged with curiosity. Ji-eun turned her head and found herself looking at a man sitting a few stools away. He was not the kind of man she was used to, no tailored suit, no designer watch. Instead, he wore a plain dark jacket over a simple gray t-shirt. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he didn't bother to keep it perfectly styled. But his eyes, they were striking. Deep. Unreadable. Maybe I wasn't before, Ji-eun muttered, taking another sip. But people change. The man tilted his head, studying her. Rough night? She let out a bitter laugh. You could say that. For some reason, she found herself talking. The whiskey loosened the pain lodged in her chest. She told him about the engagement, the betrayal, the humiliation. She didn't know why, maybe because he was a stranger. Maybe because he wouldn't judge her the way the rest of the world did. The man listened, never interrupting, just watching her with those dark, knowing eyes. And then, when she finished, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the bar. If you need a husband, he said casually, I'm right here. Over a loose floorboard, he was there to catch her before she could hit the ground, and one rainy evening when the power went out and she sat curled up on the couch feeling more lost than ever, the mysterious man simply grabbed a blanket, draped it over her shoulders, and sat beside her in silence. He didn't pity her, he just understood. And slowly, very slowly, Han Ji-eun began to realize maybe she wasn't as lost as she thought. Ji-eun had always prided herself on her ability to read people. Growing up in high society, she had learned to recognize the subtle tells, the way someone carried themselves, the slight hesitation in their voice when they lied, the flicker of greed in their eyes when they wanted something. But the mysterious man, he didn't make sense at first. She had accepted that he was just a regular guy, someone who lived paycheck to paycheck, someone who didn't care for luxury or extravagance. But little things didn't add up. It started with the wine. One evening, the mysterious man brought home a bottle of red wine, nothing fancy, just something he had grabbed from the store. Ji-eun, having grown up in a world where people debated over vintage versus terroir, had smirked. Let me guess, she teased. You're a beer guy, aren't you? The mysterious man chuckled but said nothing as he poured himself a glass. Then, to her shock, he swirled the wine in his glass, examined the color under the light, took a deep inhale, and sipped it like a sommelier. Ji-eun's brows furrowed. What was that? The mysterious man raised an eyebrow. What was what? She gestured at his glass. That was a proper wine-tasting technique. He smirked. Maybe I just like wine. Ji-eun narrowed her eyes. Normal guys don't do that. Then there was the car incident. A few days later, as they walked past a luxury car dealership, she had joked, "If you could have any car in the world, what would it be?" He barely hesitated. "Aston Martin DBS Superleggera," he said casually. V12 engine, 715 horsepower, top speed of 211 miles per hour. Ji-eun stared at him. Most guys she knew wouldn't even remember the name of that car, let alone its specs. He noticed her look and shrugged. "What? I like cars." Ji-eun let it slide. But then came the money. One evening, while he was in the shower, Ji-eun was looking for a pen in the small wooden drawer of their kitchen table when she saw it, a thick stack of crisp $100 bills. Her heart stopped. He was broke, wasn't he? They budgeted for groceries, lived in a run-down apartment, ate takeout on special occasions. So where did this come from? She carefully picked up the stack, running her fingers over the smooth paper. It wasn't just a few bills. There had to be at least $10,000 sitting in that drawer. Before she could process it, his voice came from behind her. "Looking for something?" Ji-eun jumped, nearly dropping the money. He was leaning against the doorway, a towel slung around his neck, arms crossed. She turned to him, eyes filled with confusion. "Where did this come from?" He simply walked over, took the stack from her hands, and placed it back into the drawer, closing it without a word. "Ji-eun?" He finally met her gaze, that same infuriating smirk playing on his lips. "Does it matter?" he asked. "Of course it matters. We live like we can barely afford rent, but you have stacks of cash just lying around." He shrugged. "I don't like wasting money." "That's not an answer." He chuckled, stepping closer. "Didn't you say you loved me for who I am, not for what I have?" Ji-eun's breath hitched. That's what she had said, that money didn't matter, that she didn't care about wealth. But now, standing in front of him, knowing there was something he wasn't telling her, she felt uneasy. He lifted her chin slightly with his fingers, his voice softer now. "Trust me, Ji-eun," he murmured. "Everything will make sense soon enough." But would it? Ji-eun's stomach twisted. She had seen the signs. The way he never seemed worried about money despite them living in a rundown apartment, the way he casually rattled off car specifications like a collector, the way he handled wine like a seasoned sommelier, and now a hidden stash of money. A horrifying thought crept into her mind. Was he involved in something illegal? The floor creaked beneath her as she shifted her weight. His head snapped up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, he closed the drawer, his fingers tightening around the edge, his jaw clenched, his expression unreadable. Where did that money come from? Ji-eun forced herself to ask. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "It's not what you think, Ji-eun." "Then explain it to me." He hesitated, just for a second. And that second was enough. "Are you?" Ji-eun swallowed. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" His gaze darkened. "No." "Then why are you hiding stacks of cash?" Her voice rose. "You act like we can barely afford groceries, but you have thousands of dollars sitting in a drawer. What the hell is going on?" He exhaled sharply, frustration flickering across his face. "Ji-eun, just trust me." "Trust you?" she scoffed. "How can I trust you when you keep secrets from me?" His eyes flashed. "I could ask you the same thing. You stayed with me thinking I was just some poor guy, and that was fine, right? But now, the moment you see money, you assume the worst." You think I'm a criminal?" he snapped. Ji-eun flinched, guilt washing over her. She hadn't said it outright, but had she implied it? He shook his head, his voice quieter now but laced with something raw. "I thought you saw me for who I was, not for what I had or didn't have." "I do," she whispered. His jaw worked, his hands curling into fists before he turned away. "Then act like it," he muttered, walking out of the kitchen and leaving her standing there, more confused than ever. The next day, Ji-eun couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something big. He had secrets, and she needed to know what they were. That afternoon, while sorting through some old books in their apartment, she found a yellowed newspaper clipping tucked between the pages. Her pulse sped up. It was an old business article dated 3 years ago, and right there in the center of the page was a photo of him. Or at least someone who looked exactly like him. But the name beneath the photo wasn't his. It was Lee Jun-hyuk. Her fingers trembled as she read the headline, "Billionaire heir disappears without a trace. The mystery of Lee Jun-hyuk." Ji-eun's blood ran cold. Who the hell had she fallen for? Han Ji-eun finally had enough. Ji-eun said smoothly, her voice calm and unbothered, but her eyes told a different story, dark, calculating, like she was amused by something the rest of them weren't aware of. And then she smiled, a small, knowing smile like she was holding a secret that could shake the ground they stood on. Kang Min-ho frowned slightly, as if for the first time he sensed that something wasn't quite right. Yunari, however, just scoffed. "You're delusional." But Ji-eun simply tilted her head, her smile never faltering. And Ji-eun's mother, standing beside them, couldn't shake the feeling that the game was about to change in a way Min-ho and Nari would never see coming. The apartment was quiet except for the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall. Ji-eun sat on the couch, her heart pounding, her hands trembling as she held the letter she had just found. The name on it burned into her mind, Lee Jun-hyuk. Not some ordinary man. Lee Jun-hyuk. She knew that name. Everyone in the business world did. The Jun-hyuk Empire was one of the most powerful conglomerates in the country, with investments in real estate, technology, and luxury brands. But 3 years ago, after a family scandal, Lee Jun-hyuk, the sole heir, had disappeared without a trace. And now he was sitting in their tiny apartment, pretending to be just an ordinary man. Ji-eun's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a secret, this was a lie. Jun-hyuk walked through the front door a few minutes later, casually tossing his keys onto the table. He looked at her and smiled like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. "You're home early," he said, shrugging off his jacket. "I was thinking of making pasta tonight, unless you're craving something else." Ji-eun didn't move. Her fingers gripped the letter so tightly that it crinkled under her touch. Finally, she spoke. "Lee Jun-hyuk." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Jun-hyuk's hands froze mid-motion. Slowly, his eyes lifted to hers. There was no confusion in them, no shock, just a quiet understanding. Ji-eun swallowed hard. "That's your real name, isn't it?" Jun-hyuk exhaled softly and ran a hand through his hair, his face unreadable. "Where did you find that?" he asked, his voice calm. "That's not the point, Jun-hyuk," she snapped, standing up, her emotions spilling over. "The point is, you lied to me. You let me believe you were just some regular guy when in reality, you're a billionaire." He finished for her, a small smirk playing on his lips. Ji-eun's heart twisted. "This isn't funny," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why? Why didn't you tell me?" Jun-hyuk sighed and leaned against the counter, folding his arms. "Because I didn't want you to love me for my money," he said simply. Ji-eun froze. His voice was steady, honest, raw. "You think I haven't seen it before?" he continued. "People pretending to care. Women who looked at me like I was a prize instead of a person." His eyes darkened. "I needed to know what it was like to be loved for who I am, not what I'm worth." Ji-eun's breath hitched. The truth of it cut deep. She had been raised in a world where money meant everything. She had seen people marry for status, for power. And she had almost married Min-ho, a man who had seen her as nothing more than a bargaining chip. Now, standing in front of her was Jun-hyuk, a man who had chosen to walk away from wealth to find something real. And he had chosen her. A tear slipped down her cheek. Jun-hyuk stepped closer, his voice softer now. "I never meant to hurt you, Ji-eun," he murmured. "But now that you know the truth, I have to ask." He lifted a hand to gently cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away the tear. Do you still love me? Ji-eun's heart pounded. Because for the first time in her life, money didn't matter. He did. The rooftop was bathed in the golden glow of fairy lights, the soft hum of jazz playing in the background. A gentle evening breeze carried the scent of fresh roses, mixing with the warmth of candlelight that flickered on the elegantly set table. Ji-eun stared in awe. The scene before her was breathtaking, too perfect, too unreal. She turned to Jun-hyuk, who stood beside her, his hands tucked into his pockets, watching her reaction with quiet amusement. "You did all this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jun-hyuk smirked. "I had some help." Ji-eun let out a breathless laugh, shaking her head. "You know most regular guys don't have access to rooftop venues and private chefs." Jun-hyuk chuckled. Guilty as charged. The dinner was perfect, delicate bites of gourmet dishes, a bottle of rich, velvety wine. But despite the beauty surrounding them, Ji-eun couldn't shake the emotions swirling inside her. "You're quiet," Jun-hyuk observed, watching her closely. Ji-eun sighed, setting down her fork. "I guess I'm still processing everything." "Because of the money?" Ji-eun hesitated, then nodded. "It's not that I care about wealth, Jun-hyuk. It's just, this world of yours, the one you walked away from, it's different from mine. What if I don't fit in?" Jun-hyuk leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "You think I care about any of that?" Before she could respond, Jun-hyuk suddenly stood up, and then he dropped to one knee. Ji-eun's breath caught in her throat. "Ji-eun," he said softly, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I don't want to just be the guy you married in a drunken moment. I want to be the man you choose. The man who stands beside you, not because of chance, but because you want me there." Tears welled up in her eyes as he took her hand. "Forget the money," he murmured. "Forget the name. I'm just Jun-hyuk. Yours." And she nodded. "Yes." The sun cast golden rays over the private beach resort, waves gently lapping at the shore. Ji-eun sat under a large sun umbrella, watching as two little figures, a boy and a girl, ran toward the water, laughing as Jun-hyuk chased after them. They're twins, Min-seo and Ji-ho. Ji-eun's heart swelled. Once she had lost everything, and now she had a family, a purpose, a love that had defied all odds. Jun-hyuk jogged back to her, their children giggling as they clung to his legs. He leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Happy?" he murmured. Ji-eun smiled, reaching for his hand. "More than I ever thought possible." If this story touched your heart, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories about love, resilience, and second chances. Until next time.